Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your World show with Chris and Larkin. I'm Chris Alba, and looking forward to today's show entitled The Way Forward. And this show um, has really been inspired by, what I believed my journey was and is. Um, that's my purpose, is to help move forward, help myself move forward past the past, embracing the present moment, and creating the future that creates the peace and harmony and all that stuff within myself and within the relationships that I have with other humans and this planet, including all the life that lives on actually in the cosmos and consciousness, right? And that's my goal, the way forward. And this, which means, for me, the reason I teach the gauge method is it's 5 universal principles that aren't based in any um, dogma, but they're universal principles that are contained in all the dogma and all the religions and spiritualities and practices and things like that. And today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things. I'm going to share an excerpt from Yung Pueblo, who I've been listening to his book now for a few weeks, The Way Forward. It's very insightful. I really enjoy it. But he states in the book that every time someone loves themselves better, builds their own self-awareness, understands their patterns, um, improves their ability to communicate, expands their compassion for others, the future of humanity grows brighter. Your healing, my healing, impacts the world by bringing in new peace. And to me, peace is an acceptance of what was, what is, and what can be, what will be, based on how we choose to collaborate, communicate, um, connect, in this moment moving forward. So there's definitely times in our lives that things don't show up the way that we were hoping, that um, relationships kind of take a break or dissolve. Maybe you're trying to create side income beyond your 9 to 5 job, and it just seems like you're not getting the returns that you're hoping for, and that's where gratitude comes in, because maybe it's not where you want to be right now, but it's where you need to be to practice the gratitude, the resourcefulness, the kindness, the compassion, the unconditional love for self and others in those moments that aren't easy to just go, it's all good. And not bypass it either with our intellectualism of being able to share a story from our past or share a philosophy or teaching from another person, to create a defense or protection in a way of how we're not currently living up to the expectations of where we are in this moment, whether within ourselves, in our, in relationships with other people. I know personally that I've done this myself, for many, 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 many years. For over 20 years, I've been studying this type of stuff and how to enhance your mind and how to enhance your body and your nutrition, and how to just be a better version of me, how to develop the skill sets, so I can be the best version of myself, and sharing that with other people so they have the opportunity to enhance their well-being, which ultimately, as young Pablo was saying, impacts the world. Because when we're not in dis-ease, we're in ease. And when we're in ease, it's easier to be creative, mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually, than if we're out of harmony, out of balance, out of our center, right? And I hope a lot of this makes sense um, to you. And if not, feel free to ask questions, because, you know, these concepts are big, and they're for the mind, and it's to help cultivate from within, so we're in control of our energy, we're in control of our thoughts, we're in control of our emotions, we're in control of our behaviors, not in the form of what we know masculine energy is, where there's, firm walls and containers and cages, and by force and by violence and by that stuff, but a balance between the masculine and the feminine. It's where, the river flows, the river of life flows down the river banks, and those banks allow the river to fluctuate as needed. Now, if we're not taking care of ourselves, sometimes that can, and all the mental, emotional storms are coming, that's going to raise the water levels up, which can help overtake the banks. Which, if you've ever been to a riverbank, or you've ever been to something like that, even the beach, you'll notice that there's different levels within the landscape of where the water has been at one time, but what isn't currently now. Big valleys and things like that, right? That's all been carved out by water, and that just helps focus it and funnel it down deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what happens with our emotions. As our emotional energies are flowing, as long as we can stay in a state of acceptance and not reactivity, we can slowly dissipate that energy in our nervous system, slowly come back down into center through our breath, through our five senses. That helps ground us in our actual physical being, and not the illusionary identity of who we think we are and how the world is outside of us. A lot of folks, and you see this on entertainment and social media and all that stuff, how much fear they have about things outside of themselves, and governments and people, and that kind of thing. And while it is true that we can be affected by those things, um, being caught up in that energy when it's not actually here yet is going to help bring that in, because that's what you're vibrating. There's a, I was watching something the other day, and a guy said, don't worry, I'll tell you when to panic, and the circumstances got more extreme, and she was like, I guess this is now the time to panic. Because we've all survived things. Good, bad, and indifferent. And a lot of what the ego wants to do, right? Its motivation is to keep us safe. So that's where the mental stories of this isn't going to work, or this isn't, you're not good enough, you don't have enough education, you don't have this, you don't have that, can come into play to discourage you from overcoming that by saying, okay, right now, this is what I've got. I'm grateful for what I've got. Right now, I have a home over my head. I got food in my belly. Maybe you're blessed and have a car to be able to get around, some gas money to do that, and whatever else. I mean, everybody's in a different state, and I can't pretend to know anything, because the people that I've met when I was working in finance, that had the big houses, that had the nice cars, that had a lot of that stuff, were actually indebted to the system more than they had freedom. They might have had more stuff, but if they didn't go to work, if they didn't perform at a certain level, and that income was taken away, they're actually in the negative. So they're actually indebted, right, to the system, the commercial system. And that forces us sometimes to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but feel the need to do that because we need to take responsibility for our actions in our life. Now, what happens when we don't pay our credit card debt or our school debt or our tax bills or whatever? There's consequences to that. And the goal is not to get out of balance. That's why I like to talk about holistic wellness, holistic well-being, because it takes um, a snapshot, if you will, of where you actually are in all of your life, in all areas of your life, and helps you find the center balance. And then from there, then you can refine and enhance things. If you're not aware of what's going on, it's hard to move beyond those invisible roadblocks, those invisible barriers, those shadow selves or energetic blocks that we like to talk about, right? It's not necessarily talking about the story as much anymore, which is nice, but there are blocks in our body. This weekend I was at a ceremony, and um, I'm very blessed to walk and work with a lot of beautiful, wonderful people that work in the healing industry, work with shamans from all over the world. And we were doing a ceremony with some Colombian shamans this weekend. And I'm going to tell a couple stories from this weekend's event, to try to tie all this stuff together about moving forward in a good and positive and trusting way. So I went to give somebody a hug, who she also works in sacred sexuality, and she's also a shaman, breath work facilitator, and she does some wonderful work. But when we hugged, I've always been able to, for a lot of my hugs, I can give very openly my heart and give that love. And hey, Catherine. And I've always been told that I'm a good hugger. Well, as we were embracing each other, she felt my back and she's like, okay, now release the back. And my back is tight because of all the stuff that I've carried throughout my life that I haven't released yet. And I'm working on it. It's gotten way better than it has been over the last 6 months. But carrying the stories about, being rejected and abandoned and betrayed, and, how this didn't work out and how I, gave my all here and this person didn't see me or appreciate me or, those types of things are victim stories. They're true. It's what happened. However, I don't need to live there anymore. I don't have to think about that anymore. What I need to be present for are the people in my life and how we're moving forward, how we're choosing each other, in love and trust and respect and openness and honesty. And when people fall from that, it's human to make mistakes. The question is, how do we repair that? How do we overcome that misstep in our relating to one another in that moment, so we may continue to have additional moments in our life? How do we go from those states where we're afraid that somebody is going to do something harmful to us, to being secure in ourselves, and that no matter what happens, we're going to be able to thrive through it. No matter what happens, our relationships are strong enough that they've been forged through adversities, through communication and challenging circumstances and all that kind of stuff. So where we can trust that that person isn't going to go and just go away over a small disagreement or a misunderstanding or something along that lines. Now, we all choose the conditions that we live by. Some of us choose to try to make life as comfortable as we can in our external conditions. Some of us focus on learning how to adapt and how to be a true connection of our sovereign self, of our loving self. Again, going back to the ceremony of this weekend, as we were doing our integration at the end of the weekend, I was complimented on being sovereign, being an example of a sovereign human being, because part of the ceremonies that we were doing this weekend involved the sweat lodge. And I climbed into the sweat lodge, and as I'm sitting there in the sweat lodge centering in, I just got that knowing, however you want to call it, intuition, spirit, guides, however you want to quantify it, so you can distill it into a story, condense it into a story, happened. And it was like, I'm not supposed to be here today. I'm not supposed to do this sweat. So I climbed out, and in my heart, I had absolutely no shame, no regret, none of the discouraging things that my ego would like to bring up to make me feel less empowered than I truly am as an authentic being. And I'm sure you've had similar experiences in your own life. But as I got out of the sweat lodge, the shaman that was pouring the lodge shook my hand and went on with the ceremony. So anyway, we're going through the integration and sharing the stories, and I share the story about me climbing out and what came up for me, and me leaving, and the fact that I was giving myself credit for these things that used to be there, that used to make me challenged and would make me push myself to be a different version of actually who I truly am. And the man, his name's Alejandro, before the next person went on, he was quiet through the whole round until I spoke, and he said, well, I have to tell a story, and it makes more sense to do it now than later. And so the long and the short of it, I guess, is a few weeks prior, he had a dream where someone died in that Inipi, that sweat lodge. And he didn't know if he should continue the ceremony, if he should cancel the ceremony, if he should just take out that part of the sweat, of the ceremony, and just not do the sweat. There was all these different methods of ways that he could try to alter the dream that he had. And, after sitting with it and speaking with some elders, because that's what they do in more southern South American regions, is they talk to their elders and stuff like that, because it's less dogmatic, right? It's more based on their personal wisdom and those types of things. But and he said, just trust that it's going to be fine. It's going to all work out. And so as everybody's climbing into the sweat lodge, he said that dream revisited him again. So it came back up in his memories, right? That he had that dream, and that here we are getting ready to do this thing. He said, and right then, that's when you came out of the lodge. And I knew everything was going to be okay. Now, this is profound in itself. This is wild, in many different aspects. And, I'll let you, be the discerner of that. Those messages of that story, because that's the power of the story. And it was very shocking to me, but also very confirming to me that I have a very strong connection with whatever that is on the other side. Now, I know my purpose here in life is to be the best human being that I can be in the moment, and being a caregiver, and doing the best that I can of being of service, which means taking care of myself so I can be in a high vibration to take care of other people and the planet and things like that. But that's why I'm here. That's part of the purpose that I'm here. So that was beautiful in many, many aspects. Also showed me how protected I was. And then later the next day, I was with one of the gentlemen that we did ceremony with, and we were talking about it. And we were trying to figure out why I thought that was. And I said, it's interesting for me through my own experiences of this stuff that the more people in a lodge, the harder it is for me in my heart. And I said, I don't know if it's just a depth of empathy that I truly am not aware of, where I can feel, I know I can feel other people's pain, and a lot of times, and for most of my life, I took it on as my own. It's still something that I'm working on discerning, but also in those lodges, it was very painful for me to go through those experiences. And I tended, especially when they were the more females in the lodge than males, that's when I had the most difficult times. And usually would choose to excuse myself from the lodge. And I've had some beautiful confirmations on those lodges, and the rain, and all the different things that happen during those things. So that's just my life. That's just been my life. And the thing that I love about external information is it informs a belief of how other people process their thoughts, their emotions, and their behaviors to get us to this place, which gives me a greater depth of understanding of how I can enhance myself based on their stories, their recommendations, their experiences, their own wisdom. But at the same time, doesn't attach me to any specific teaching or identity that keeps me limited from seeing another side of a truth. And that to me is where compassion and gratitude and kindness live. Because when we can hold space, not only for ourselves in trying times, if we can do that with compassion, right? If we're going through a difficult time in our life, and we can be compassionate to ourselves, we can be caring to ourselves, we can be kind to ourselves, knowing that the storm is going to pass, do what we can to, button down the hatches and, all that kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, know that the storm will pass and we will see the sun again. That the clouds don't turn off the sun. They just block the warmth of the sun. And the darker the clouds, the less light that gets through, the more coldness. And the deeper you go into that despair, if you will, the deeper you learn about your own compassion, your own love, based on a choice, not the emotion that we've been taught about. A lot of the teachings that I'm shifting a lot of my content and stuff around about talking about emotions is talking about how it's energy and motion, and the labels that we give it are the conditions that we've been able to identify them as. As I can remember as a child, my stomach hurting and saying, "Oh, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts." Well, and my parents saying, "Oh, you're just a hypochondriac, da 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 da." Well, there's the rejection that I was feeling. And what it was I had emotions inside of me that I didn't know how to talk about. Things that I saw, things that I experienced that weren't safe in my home environment as a kid. That as an adult, it's my responsibility to unpack that stuff, dust it off, and get rid of what no longer serves me. Allowing me to move forward, because we're always moving forward. There's no such thing as being off your path. You can be off your vision. You can be off your goals. You can be off your whatever, but your way forward, the path of life, is always presented in the now. And the quality of how you see this heaven on earth this Garden of Eden that we can plant the seeds of awareness and grow into anything we wish to do, um, is always present now. And what we've grown through to get to this moment is a reflection of our true egoic character, the conscious parts of it and the unconscious parts of it. Because if we're being swept away in the rapids of the life of, the rapids of life, we're too much in our feminine energy and our feeling energy, and it's broken the walls down of our masculine mind, which is actually a good thing, because then we actually get to see how expansive we are as we each day have a new day. It's by moving past the confines, the obstacles, as Larkin would say, the obstacles are the opportunity, right? Because that's going to show us who we desire to be. Now, there's a lot of different teachings, and we're all trying to use a lot of the same verbiage to try to make it more understandable and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I was thinking about talking about a lot about Ho'oponopono today and the mantras that they use in Ho'oponopono. That's a beautiful chant. That's a beautiful thing. If you don't want to practice Hindu or, some Eastern philosophies, or even some native traditions where there's a whole new dialect you have to learn to fully comprehend everything, use English. It creates less separation. You already know it. You already know your native tongue. So interpret those messages that are spoken about and then bring it into your native language. So the Ho'oponopono mantras, if you're not aware of it, is I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. And, as I got certified in this, it was just repeat these over and over an hour, for hours. And, that's no different than a tantric or a Hindu practice or a Buddhist practice that involves chanting. Hi, Larkin. How are you? Thanks for your patience. You're on mute, darling.
This is awesome. No, I love it. I'm so excited about this, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's when you guys hear me talk about that, I tell people to just say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for at least 15 minutes. That's my goal, is to try to get people to do it for that amount of time. That changed my life.
Sure.
And I think too, what you were saying about, we have to be able to look at both sides of the coin. We have to be able to look and say, ego is not bad. It creates our obstacles for opportunity, and it gives us the vehicle to be human and have this life experience. That's a must. So we have to integrate and include that, but be aware of it. The other thing is, there is a language. There's the energetic language. There's the intuitive language. There's a language of knowing. And so when we use words I believe that when you can, and this is part of what my Awakening Your Intuition program does. Hi, Catherine. I really work on with clients doing really what you're talking about, like learning to read the energy. And then when you do that, you can better define your emotion, and you can better express it and share it. Now, if you share it, this is kind of what you were saying. If you share it with people that haven't had that experience, that don't know it personally, the words can get tangled up for them. They're going to make of it what they will. But if you speak it or share it with those who have experienced it, less words, if any words are needed. Right. Sometimes it's just one word, or you've had a shared experience and you can smile and nod. And if they are in the know, no matter what language you are, no matter what terminologies, you can feel your way there. And this is why the experiential aspect is so important, I think it's important to, in the world of contrast, to make sure we don't get caught up in contrasts, to be like, oh, that was, ego is really bad, or this and that is really good. Like, to look at how is it serving you in the moment? What does it have to teach you in the moment? And the more you do this, the more you realize how everything is working out for you. But I love your conversation about chance, because it's that meditation has the thank you in it. And I just want to say, for whoever's listening live, hi Louise, welcome, live or on the rebroadcast, there's nothing that substitutes experience. And it's great to get on here and listen to us and our stories. It's great to get on and watch, hikers or rock climbers or divers or whatever it is you want to do, dancers, martial artists. But if you haven't done it, if you don't know the experience, it's not the same, which is why I was going to actually start a gratitude week next week, Chris, and do a whole week of it since it's Thanksgiving. If you guys could just take one time in your life, take 15 minutes in a very quiet place. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I love the peace and presence of God, source, spirit in such a condensed form that I feel in a church or a temple, in the woods, and you can do it anywhere. I mean, I can create this resonance anywhere, but a lot of people can't. A lot of people can't even feel what I'm talking about anyway. That they haven't felt that yet. But to understand how in depth, how your reality is also within you. When I sat down for that half an hour and I knelt in that church and I just said, thank you, thank you. And I went through all the list of things I wanted to say thank you for. And I did that for a long time. I mean, it was a good half an hour. I didn't run out of things. And then I got to the point where, I pretty much I realized, I didn't need to keep listing things. I didn't need to. All of a sudden, the thank you encompassed everything. But what happened within me, guys, was there was such an internal shift of my state of mind, of how I felt, of my mood, of my presence. I was in a just, nirvana, bliss. I mean, this is why the Buddha sat there for so long. Just sat there. He didn't need to do anything else. Everything I'd ever needed to seek to feel, I was sitting there feeling. It was the fact that it had been 3.5 hours and my dogs needed to eat and I needed to get home and the church was going to be closing shortly, that it was more practical. I needed to get up and move. Right. But I walked out of there a different person. I didn't just remember. I knew that changed me internally, and then my life started to change. So if you've listened to what Chris has been sharing, but you haven't yet taken the time to do a practice like that, the one I shared is just the simplest one. I mean, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Give yourself enough time to feel it, because typically if you say thank you to someone, you may not really feel much of a shift. But if it becomes your mantra and you feel it shift your frequency, you'll have a reality and an insight you've never had before. 15 minutes, once in your life. That's all I'm asking.
Well, and the feeling part is actually the shifting part. So without the feel, it's not going to shift, because we can intellectualize. I mean, I was sharing a little bit about that, in the beginning of the podcast, where, I could intellectualize. I had all these philosophies lurk into to move perspective into alignment with where I was, so I could justify how I've been or how I was being, or those types of things, without having to look at the limited version of self that they were trying to share with me, based on how they were affected by me, either intentionally, consciously, or unintentionally, unconscious. And it happens so much, in our conversations. We could be having a great time with somebody, and then all of a sudden we share a thought or a feeling, and all of a sudden they shift and they start pushing away and they start getting defensive, and they, want to end the call or, the conversation or whatever, because they're getting ready to, I used to say in coaching, when I used to do a lot of speaking, I'd say, it's the beeper of the invisible fence of your comfort zone. If you've ever seen an invisible dog fence, the dogs are trained not to go and get electrocuted by a beep. So it starts beeping to warn them, like, hey, you keep going, you're going to get it. And if they proceed, then they're going to get zapped. And I think that happens for us a lot of times too, as we're going through life. I used to tend to get loud, or I would walk away. And I would just walk away. And many times, because I was so in my emotions, I didn't even say anything like, can we pause this? I'm worked up. I need to go breathe and cool down, because I don't want to say something or do something out of this higher altered emotional state that I'm going to later regret the consequences of, because I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. I'm going to hurt someone's self-image, because I'm going to share something in not a nice way. Even if I meant it to be helpful, that energy that I was holding on to wasn't good. One of the stories, I'm trying to be careful of what I share, because it was ceremony. And these are very sacred teachings that the Amazonians and the Colombians hang on to. So I'm being careful, not sharing too much of it. But one of the things that was posed was, when is violence justified, right? When is it okay to be violent? What, stand up for justice and those types of things. And he related it to a story he once asked an elder, and that was when it was okay to spank your kid. Now, I'm not advocating this, it's just a story. But what the elder said was, the only time it's okay to spank your child, to teach them a lesson, is when you're centered in your heart. And you don't have any anger, you don't have any rage, you don't have any frustration, you don't have any of those things going on with you. So when you do it, it's a clear message of why you're doing it. And immediately, of course, I flash back to all the times I got what I got as a kid, which, a lot of times weren't necessarily as much spankings as beatings. But I don't even remember what I did. All I can remember is the energy and the anger and the hostility and the fear that was coming up for me as my dad or my mom came at me with violence. And then, once I got tough enough, I guess, my dad's way bigger than me. And I'm sure even if it ever came down to it, if we had to really go to Dukes, it would have been a good thing. But once I had that in me, that he couldn't hurt me anymore, that fear, that power was taken away from him. Like when he didn't get that response from me anymore, like that fear. And I was just like, okay, do your thing. Like, it'll be over in a little bit, and then I'm just going to move on, right? That is when it stopped, because it wasn't feeding that part of him anymore. It came out more in alcohol and, being overly busy, as I understand now. And, I was very grateful that when I had my son, that I worked really hard at not duplicating or replicating the unconscious stuff of my father. So even if I did lose my temper, I was quick to come back and talk to him, apologize for me losing control of myself, apologize for me raising my voice, apologizing for scaring him, and just really trying to be as heart-centered and as level-minded as I could, and sharing where I was in a mental and emotional state, and that my behavior was not okay. And apologize to him, but at the same time, letting him know that his actions or what he did or what he said or whatever were unacceptable. Because he was growing up, he was making mistakes, and it's okay to make a mistake. That's human. The goal of being a conscious human being, I believe, is not to continue to make the same mistakes, creating the same patterns. So, a lot of the patterns that I've created in my life unconsciously were the ones that I didn't think were that bad until I got the wake-up call by how I affected somebody that I really loved and cared about. And then I had to take an honest look at myself. I had to be humbled. And, sometimes, as I was talking to a friend last night, we were talking about childhood stuff, and she's got cancer right now and all these different things, and how all these challenges or experiences, challenging experiences, right, help us grow into our most loving, most authentic, most passionate selves if we choose to. If we choose to say that I don't have any control over this, or it's not that bad, or we discount it, or that's them, not me. I'm gonna blame them. I'm gonna project that they yelled at me first, and so now I'm justified in responding the way that I did. Any of that stuff limits our ability to actually be awake, or aware, or truly present in our present state. Because when we realize that what we say and what we do and how we feel affects this present moment into our future, we're very mindful about how we put any energy out. And if it's not, I know Louise Hayes and all them used to say, like, if you're not in a good mental and emotional state, go take a nap, because whatever you're going to do isn't going to work for you. You're not going to be able to fake it till you make it, because eventually you're going to get frustrated. And then that false self, or that immature self, or that wounded self, or the inner child, whatever archetypes you want to use to define these things, go for it. But ultimately, it's the revealing of the stuff that we haven't processed yet. We haven't come into peace with. We haven't found acceptance with. We haven't found enough love within ourselves to love the person that harmed us, because we know they're not bad people. They made a mistake and it hurt us. And then if we weren't able to repair that, it's like an energetic wound. And it's sometimes really hard to repair those things because they're invisible. It's not like we're working on a car or a house or something like that. And, oh, this part's bad. And you just you put new one in, good. Now it's good as new. The energetic self of us is formless. The consciousness of us is formless, full of potential. Again, going back to that origin story, a creator created a being, and believe it or not, the being wasn't very motivated, because it was being what it was created to do, to be a being. So what had to happen? Well, then had to be created death, time, and gender to create motivation for us to evolve. Because just to be, as Larkin and Buddha, is very well known for self-realization. That's great for self. But to grow and heal the humanity that we're all trying to heal the planet, to do all those things, it's a collective effort. Now, we only have control over our individual self, our perspective, our energy. However, it's when we merge our visions with others that those visions expand. That's the desire to be in a social relationship, isn't it? To feel better than just being by ourselves. What do you think, Lorcan?
I have the opposite way of getting to the same point.
Right? Of course, but that's the human experience.
Well, I think we need to I think oftentimes it becomes codependent when we look at it in terms of when we forget or ignore the individuality about it. I think we have to be very careful with that. Because as you know, as you mentioned, Chris, it's the collective awakening and evolution comes through the individual.
Sure.
So I think that as people are listening that maybe aren't as familiar with this than you and I are, I would just share it from a different angle, depending on what angle they're coming from, to make sure they understand too that your spiritual and soul journey here, although we don't like the sound of this, you are alone. There is an element of aloneness in your soul journey.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going through it alone and yet collectively. And this both indicates that what we do matters, what we do and don't do matters, our level of consciousness matters, and our interaction, our community, and the way we handle it is both our framework for the individual to have challenges and grow, and is also the ultimate experienced result. But the work itself is actually done personally. Even in a community, your interaction with others, your electing people to different jobs, your distribution of who does what, your ability to communicate, all of that you see as an outcome collectively in a community is ultimately the result of the individual.
Absolutely. But the individual's working as a community. I mean,
can I finish?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You have to be careful thinking of it that way.
Okay.
I want to break it down this way because you might understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we share that with people, what I see happening is a couple of things. Number one, I see we often forget about the responsibility of our own work within that community. If we don't remember I don't want to say, I don't know what word I want to use. I don't want to say individuality, but our own radical responsibility for our own growth. Because you can get lost in the community. If you want to have a thriving community, it can only evolve together if the individuals are functioning from their own personal responsibility. And I'm emphasizing this because I believe that people often, once they get in a community, because of how our mind is set for survival in a clan, we often get sucked in and we often lose our authenticity and our own radical responsibility. For example, have you guys noticed when you're alone and no one is pushing you to admit something or confide something or change something, you probably have some introspection about, yeah, I was really hard on this person, or I'm not the best communicator. If someone is standing in her face saying, you're a terrible communicator, you're probably going to resist that. But if there's no egoic resistance from others around you, you're probably going to seek your own center more authentically and come to some realizations. But whenever, at any point, we are around another human being, we are in the presence of their egoic self. And our waking up challenge is on. And we are always, to some extent, even if it's subconsciously, responding to that. We're either switching what we do to be accepted or not rejected and please, or to resolve an issue, or to make our point, or to be right, or to try not to be any of those things and to try to be all the things we've practiced. When you're working on yourself, there's a different state of mind there. And so my point is not to negate community, but we all over the world, we talk about this in a spiritual sense. And wherever you have this, if the individuals are not doing the work, even if they are doing the work, whatever the level of the individuals of that community is what the community will be. So how can the community help the individual? It provides challenges and opportunities. If it is a supportive supportive spiritual community, or a very nature-bound community, like a lot of the communities that Chris likes to work with and learn from, then you find for survival, the people individually have been taught to be a certain way, and those tend to be their internal habits, the spiritual practices, or the way they're taught to handle anger and reaction. If you're talking about something like we have here, which I think Chris tries to replicate a lot of those more native cultures here in his work and discussions here, in our Western societies, we tend to try to emulate these communities, but we don't have the personal work that needs to be put into it from a very young age. Do you know what I'm saying? We're not raised to do that. So if you go to the Netherlands, for example, they are very community oriented. Their whole culture over there is set up for the family to support people. But their mindset is not, there are those that have and those that have nots. They all work together as a community. They've done this for generations and generations and generations. So it is instilled in them, like a lot of the cultures you talk about, Chris, that you study with. Most of you guys listening, not all of you, but most of you are coming from more of a Western culture. And so you may see this ideal, you may hear about the cultures Chris is talking about, or talk about community. But my point here is be very aware of the individual work, because we have to remember community is of the individual work.
Well, the community could be an professional organization too. You know, I mean, look at a sales.
All of it. It doesn't matter what kind it is. It doesn't matter.
And you know, you're right. You know, it does come down to individual effort. It's not just I'm a part of a community, so now I don't have to do anything, because then you're not part of the community. You're not participating. And everybody has their perceptions and their perspectives and their roles and but you know, doing it in a group fashion, and this is what I was trying to get to.
I know, and this is where you and I disagree, though. Go ahead.
Doing it in a group fashion. I mean, even in the show, why do you and I do the show together? One, we create contrast for one another, and two, because of your following and my following, we're seen in front of more people. You know, we have more opportunity for expansive growth. You know, and that's the benefit of creating alliances rather than distractions. a distraction, someone that says they're going to do something, or whatever, and then doesn't do it. And there's time frames, and there's all kinds of different things and reasons why it doesn't happen when it happens. But the bottom line is, if we keep revisiting the things of why are we here, where are we going from here, and trying to implement creative ways, there's still going to be mistakes. Like, it's impossible to make a mistake. It's impossible not to make a mistake when you're trying something new. It doesn't matter what it is. You could martial arts, learning to draw, playing an instrument, whatever, in a new relationship, whatever it is, new job, you're going to make mistakes. But the point of those mistakes is to show you where you're not fully capable yet, fully developed in those skill sets yet, to where you've mastered it in a way to where you can be seen as a better version of yourself, or someone else holds you in this high regard because you play a mean flute or something. I watched the guy today, he was playing the guitar, the didgeridoo, and some other instruments. I was like, you show off, because I'm trying to learn the didgeridoo, and I haven't learned how to do the circular breathing yet. So it's just, it doesn't sound very good yet, right? And it was like, oh, you show off, but wow, I'm gonna subscribe to you because I'm inspired. It's creating hope that I can get better in this instrument, and one day that I'll be able to just play the thing, let alone play guitar and drums and all the other things that he had set up there. But that helps us move past it, right? Or we could sit and go, I'll never be that good. And I'll never be able to be that talented. I'll never learn that. So why try? Because the ego is not going to want to fail, right? So it's not even going to put the energy in to try to overcome it. Where in community, this has been my personal experience, when someone says something compassionate or nurturing, or, held space for me in a way that I needed in that moment, that shifted me in profound ways that 20 plus years of egoic individual development and perspective has not done.
Absolutely. Because of why? Because exactly what I was saying before. Your interaction with others create these choices,
right,
challenges, which become your opportunities.
Well, and what I was just sharing, it wasn't a challenge. It was actually, like in a loving, nurturing way. That
I know that. But I was listing them. It offers challenges, opportunities.
Sure.
Each time it's a choice.
Right.
Depending on how you respond to that person.
Right.
That's what that human interaction does.
Right.
But I Chris, I'm not arguing with you on all this. I just think that I think it is so important that as we present community, people understand this, because I have watched for decades people create or get into communities, and yes, we can define them however we want: a business, a nonprofit, a family. I don't care how you want to define a community. But that's not the point. The point is that what is your perspective going in? Because a lot of times these communities are started, and I don't want people just going in and relying on that. I see people going in and relying on it. And I think a lot of that came from the new age community a few decades ago that started in, where people started on these new and different things. And there's sort of a subconscious assumption. And that's just here in the West. There's sort of a subconscious assumption sometimes that comes with that. And I just think it's important people understand their role in the community and their role as an individual in the community, and how they serve and challenge each other.
We're always in a community. We're of humanity.
Of course we are.
and I'm talking about going to this, I mean, and this is the Southern's teachings, right? We're all brothers and sisters. We're all consciousness. And so going to that source of the bare essential, of we all come from the same place, whatever you want to call it. That's the individual. That's the perspective. That's the ego. But understanding in our hearts, it doesn't have language. It doesn't have agendas. It beats. It keeps us present to this moment. When we feel excited or scared or, those types of things, maybe it beats a little faster to let us know that our energies, our hormones or whatever, our nervous system is getting amped up. And that's an opportunity for the individual to witness that, to observe that, to sit with that, to breathe through that, and allow that energy to come back down, back into the sweet spot of our hearts, of our stillness, the depth of our stillness, right? Because up here is pretty agitated, thinking a bunch of different thoughts, different perspectives, different ways we were right or different ways we were wronged, right? And what I'm proposing is, if we come from the source of we are all humans first, and then whatever practice we do, whether it's Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, shamanism, it doesn't matter. They're all based in the same universal laws of nature, of the cosmos. That allows us to share freely and openly. And no one's right or wrong, because we're all innocent on the things that we haven't experienced yet, that we haven't learned yet, that we haven't implemented in our lives yet, because we haven't found the importance of it. So, and I love this topic, and I love the discussion that we've been having. I hope everybody, on the live is enjoying this conversation, and on the rebroadcast. Thanks for your comments and checking in with us and saying hi, everybody. Super duper appreciate that. But again, the reason that I felt called to title this show and to talk about this subject is, what led us up to this moment is only a reflection of the potential of what can be brought forth. And it's in this present moment, surrendering the ego so we don't have to be right, that we're not wrong, but we just have our own unique differences, allows us to see both polarities of ego and soul self, of authentic self, source self, however you want to call it. And I'm not here to, I don't want to create any more division in our humanity than there already is. There's enough of that shit. I talk about the left and the right wing all the time. It's the same darn bird. But we're caught up in these labels and all these, the way it's supposed to be and the way we were taught and all these things. And it doesn't allow us flexibility in our beingness, because we have to confront the conditional mind. And until we surrender the conditional mind, we'll never tap into the unconditional potential that we have as conscious, creative human beings. I don't know if Larkin's coming back or not. So we'll go ahead and end the show today. Much love and gratitude for all that you are, all that you do, all that you choose to be. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check us out on social media and YouTube. Subscribe to our channels. That helps out a lot. I want to spend a special thank you to all those that have been sharing our podcast on their social media channels. I super duper appreciate it. I know Chancey Brown is one of them that is doing it very regularly. So I appreciate that so much. And thank you for all your love and support and encouragement to continue on the show. Because, you know, it's helpful. Helps keep the motivation. So love you guys. Have a great week. See you next week. Bye-bye.